Hello, hooray, and welcome to the channel. My name is Victor, and I'm going to be your anchor for this series. So this is the Ethical Hacker series, and right now we're going to be looking at module 10 of the series. So we're going to be looking at ethical hacker tools and code analysis. Now, if you're new on this series, I started this series some few months ago, and we've gone quite a lot. I will drop the playlist in the description. If you've not subscribed, we've gone through 10 modules and we've gone through about between the 10 to 15 labs, and we still have few labs to go. Right now, we are in module 10, and we're trying to run some of the labs for module 9 and module 10. So you could subscribe, you could share this with friends that are interested in cybersecurity, they're interested in ethical hacking. So this is an over a 10-hour series. I think by the time we're done, we should have a comprehensive series on ethical hacking that is roughly around 10 hours. Now, if you're also new to web programming, basic networking, scripting, I have some intro courses on the playlist, so you could check the channel playlist. You're going to see quite a lot of courses. There are over 20 courses in playlist available. So do well to ask your questions. You could comment, you could subscribe, you could share with friends that are interested in cybersecurity. So let's get to work. Now, we have some labs here that have to do with code analysis, have to do with ethical hacker tools. I have two of them that I would love to go through. The very first one is how do we analyze exploit code? Because for every hack that is going to happen, it's going to be done through code. At times, somebody wants to do data exfiltration. What I mean is that somebody wants to collect data from an already compromised system. It's going to do that through scripting, through code. Somebody wants to redirect you to a site for a phishing site. The person is going to do that through code. So most of the times, cybersecurity has to do with one form of scripting or the other. Now, for this lab, we're going to be looking at how do you analyze and exploit code? How do you tell what this particular code is doing, depending on the language the code is written on? Now, the second lab we're going to be working on is how do we do some of this automation, and how do we differentiate between scripts that are written in Bash, Python, Ruby, and PowerShell. Now, before we get to these labs, because the approach for this training series have always been that we would take the module, then we'll start taking the labs, right? Then we take the second module, then we start taking the labs, right? Then we take the third module, then we start taking the labs. So if you go through the series, you see our approach is always to first lay the foundation, go through some concepts. Once we've grabbed all of the concepts here, then we can begin the lab. So let's start from the very first concept, which is about tools and code analysis. Now, what you want to understand in this particular module is that you want to understand the basic concept of scripting and software development. Now, there is this thing about people getting into cybersecurity, people getting into ethical hacking, people trying to hack things or try to protect IT infrastructure without understanding how those systems were built. There are two concepts I would normally advise students to make sure that they can do or they have skills and competence for. It's scripting and networking. These two skill sets are very, very critical and very important. On this channel, I've also atomized about 10 non-technical career paths. You could search the channel. I will see how to drop the link also in the description. Non-technical cybersecurity paths that you might want to explore. But if you want to do technical cybersecurity, either offensive or defensive, or you want to stay in between, you need to understand some of these concepts. Then another thing is because also that when you are doing pen testing, at times you have to analyze code. Then you want to understand quite a lot of tools. There are different tools across all the levels of a pen test, whether it is reconnaissance on footprinting, whether it's you trying to scan, whether it's you trying to actually hack, gain access, either it's you trying to do your reporting, trying to do your presentation. There are quite a lot of tools that you will need So in this particular module 10, I would want to explain all of these tools, or most of the critical and important tools. Some of those tools, quite a lot of them are free. You have them on the Kali box. I'll explain them, how you could use them, what you need to know before you use them, what are some of the inputs you need to use them, right? And what might be the output and how to analyze the output that you have. So you need to also be able to classify pen testing tools for their primary use case. Now let's get to understanding basics of scripting. Now, softwares have what we call software development lifecycle. Every software is going to go through that particular stage. Now, if you need to work as a successful pen tester, you need to be familiar with coding, most especially scripting languages, right? If you have knowledge of commonly compiled languages, that's a plus for you. So basic languages that you should learn, or scripting language you should learn, is Python, right? PHP, right? Bash, PowerShell. For compiled languages, that's a good plus. But scripting languages also will help you to be able to create and automate some of your tasks. Now, first, you need to understand that malware is code. When we say malware is code, it means that if somebody needs to hack or wants to compromise your website, for instance, the person will draft some code and see how to deploy it on your website. Now, if you're running pen testing, at times you can stumble, or maybe when you're doing digital forensics, so to say, you might stumble some of the script. Now, you need to be able to understand what's actually happening, right? Because threat actors will try as much as possible to obfuscate, to conceal, to hide their code, and make it very, very hard for you to identify and see what that particular script is doing. I've had to rescue or recover sites that are hacked, and you find some of these indicators of compromise. You see some of these scripts, some of these codes. Now, you will find something very, very, very funny, because at times, some of this code can stay within existing code. Now, on this channel, I've done a very comprehensive playlist on how a website that was hacked was recovered. I will also how to drop the playlist, the link in this particular video. I hope I don't forget that. Now, you can actually recover some of these compromised sites if you have some skill set, if you have some knowledge about how this code has been scripted. So that's the reason why you need to have this skill set. Then if you need to automate reconnaissance, vulnerability scanning, and make your test more efficient and effective, these tools are important. We're going to look at them. Now, there are some basics you need to understand. Things like loops, conditionals, Boolean operators, string operators, arithmetic operators. This is what you learn in your basic programming. Maybe where you're learning Python, PHP, JavaScript, Perl, whatever programming language you're learning. These are the basic things you need to learn. For instance, I'll tell you how to go about that also. For instance, how do you repeat through a code? Let's say you want to say, for every IP address, can you scan the first IP address, then you scan the second IP address, then you scan the third IP address, then you scan the fourth. So that's like a repetitive task. So you use a loop to be able to do that. For instance, in conditionals, you're trying to say, okay, if the IP range is within this particular range of IP address, we want to classify this as an intrusion. Let's say, for instance, I'm actually working on a task on a project currently where I am building an intrusion detection based e-learning management system. So what the system does is that it's like MFA. You know, in authentication, we always talk about multi-factor authentication, where we want to verify users before we grant them access to digital assets. Now, for instance, you log into the platform, it locks your IP address, it keeps your IP address. For the very first 2 times or 3 times that you put in your IP address when you start using the platform, it keeps those 2-3 IP address. Now, the thing is that if you try to log in subsequently, the system is going to check if your IP address is amongst the first 2-3 IP address you used while you registered and had first access to your platform, to the e-learning management system, for instance. Now, if your IP address is not among those lists of IP address, what's going to happen is that it's going to tell you that maybe we have some suspicious behavior, verify it is you. You're going to send a authentication code to either email or to your phone, and you have to enter that particular code to have access. To do that, that script, that code, that software, we have to do some conditional, run through some conditional statements to check if your IP address belongs to those first set of IP address. So these are things you need to also understand. For instance, Boolean. Take, for instance, I'm using the case study of still the e-learning platform. If we say we want to check for multiple conditions, we want to check if it is the correct email, if it is the same IP address, if it is within the same geographical location. So if I want to check for two conditions, IP address, geographical location, if it is an AND, what it means is that the software is going to check to make sure that your IP address is correct, the first 2, 3 IP address you used. Then the second is going to be that you are within the same geographical area. If it is or, so that means one of the conditions can be true before the software authenticates and grants you access. So these are very, very important basics that every pen tester should be able to know. Every pen tester should be able to have basic understanding of scripting. Now, data structures. Now, in programming, there's what we call data structures. All your data are going to be in certain formats. So the data can come as a list, can come as a comma-separated values, like what you have in an Excel sheet. Then it can be a dictionary, it can be an array, it can be JSON, it can be trees. Now, I'll explain very, very simple ones. Now, when you say a list, let's say list of cybersecurity courses. So we say cybersecurity courses equals to, so we have a square bracket here where we now fix items and separate them by commas. So we say digital forensics, we say malware analysis, we say GRC, right? So these are cybersecurity courses. You see the way this data is sorted out, right? It's always ordered. And that's different from a dictionary. A dictionary, your dictionary is always key paired or key pairs, where you say what is something and what is their meaning. Something like, what's your name? This is it. What's your social handle? This is it. So that's what you call a dictionary. So in programming, you're going to have different data types, and you should be familiar with them. Now, in scripting, in software, what do we call a library? So a library is just a collection of reusable code. Now, most of the times, at times we can refer to them as frameworks, so to say. Now, for every type of programming language, most of the times they will have what they call libraries, or they will have what they call frameworks. These are two different things, but at times, in some contexts, you can use them interchangeably, where you say, anytime you want to create a login system for a script for a website, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. So the principle is always what we call dry programming. Do not repeat yourself. DRY, dry programming. So the library can include pre-written code. So anytime you want to create a login system, there's only something you can use. Anytime you want to do documentation for help, there's something. You want to use some classes, some subroutines, some templates, you always have all of those things pre-done. So that's what you refer to as a library. Now, procedure. So a procedure is always a section of code that's created to perform a specific task. It's kind of slightly different from what a function is going to do, but it just tells what the process is like. A procedure can be used several times throughout a program, right? So in some programming languages, functions and procedures are practically the same thing, like I talked about, because a function is meant to like deliver a particular result. Like you can do a function that is going to calculate your CGPA if you're a student. You can do a function, and that function will just get maybe what your name is, get what your score for first semester is, what your score for the courses for second semester. It will compute them and it will echo out the result. That's what a function is going to do. Now, a procedure can also be synonymous. Now, I've talked about function. Now, if you want learning resources for some of these things I'm talking about, now you could go to tutorials point. I use them a lot. You could go to W3 schools. For PowerShell, you can actually use the Microsoft documentation. Microsoft have a very, very robust documentation for all of their tools, all of their features. They have it properly documented on their site. Now, a class is a code template that can be used to create different objects. Most of the times you use this in Python, in Java, and in C++. Now, the goal here for doing all of these things is so that when we see a particular exploit, when we see a particular hack that has happened within our network, within our applications, our website, our cloud infrastructure, we can be able to identify them. We can be able to inspect those scripts, right? And tell what they are doing and see whether they are suspicious, whether they are legitimate or not. And also, we can also create our own script to automate some of the things we might want to do or to make life quite a lot easier for ourselves. Now, Bash. So Bash is a command shell and language interpreter. So you find this in most Linux, Mac, and at times even Windows, where you want to have an adaptive environment. Now, so it's just that environment you use to like type all of the commands you want to type and have all of those things interpreted and relayed back to you. Now, Python is so popular. So if you want to look at one language to learn, if you want to go into pen testing, if you want to go to cybersecurity, that language is what? Python, right? So I think the next language, if you want to learn, is going to be PHP. Then the next one should be, let's say, JavaScript. These three languages are excellent toolkits for every pen tester because it will help you to familiarize yourself with most of the applications created around the world, especially if you're going to go into web pen testing, which is one of my favorites. If you want to see how to do bug bounty, if you want to know how to do web digital forensics, if you want to learn how to do, if you want to go into web pen testing. So these are very, very popular, important languages that most applications are built around. Now, if you want to go learning that, so you could use the W3 Schools Python tutorial. The most important thing anytime you want to learn any language is one, understand the basics of the language. That's to say what the language does, what application is the language mostly used for. Like Python is so popular when it comes to data analytics, machine learning, AI. I'm a fan of AI. I'm a fan of machine learning. I've done this for quite a lot of years. I think over 10 years I've done this. You could use them to create models to do quite a lot. Now, but Python is also a very, very popular language when it comes to scripting, when it comes to automation. So that's why it's always used in cybersecurity, right? You could use Python for web, for mobile, for all of that. But there are two important things that Python can be used for, of course, which is machine learning, AI, and also for cybersecurity. Quite a lot of folks use Python to do even game development and a whole lot. Like I said, first thing you want to understand the basics of the language and what is best used at. The second thing you want to learn how to do is to learn how to set up a development environment. You know, we have what you call the production environment and the development environment. You want to learn how to set up that kind of environment where you're going to be doing your coding. So it means that you need an editor. So you can use Visual Studio Code, you can use Sublime Text, you could use any kind of environment to do your coding. You could even use online tools where you don't need to install anything on your software. Just say code Python online. The third thing you want to learn how to do is to do CRUD operations, right? CRUD. You want to learn how to create stuffs, right? Read stuffs, update stuffs, and delete stuffs from a database. So that's to say that you want to learn how to use the language and the database together and create something small. You want to create, let's say, a simple login system, a simple blog, something very simple that you can explore a CRUD operation, right? So if you want more tutorials on this particular aspect, you could write in the comment section and I will let you know when it's going to be live on the channel. Don't forget to also subscribe because I've committed to bringing out quite a lot of content. And also, if you want to join our mentorship group, you could use the WhatsApp link on the about section of the channel and you can hit us up. Now, Ruby is another very, very awesome language. I'm not a fan of Ruby, but it's a very nice language you could use for scripting. It's also used in a web and several other type of application. Then PowerShell. So PowerShell, basically Microsoft based. It can be used for exploitation and post-exploitation. When we say exploitation, what we mean is that it can be used to compromise systems. If you go to learn.microsoft.com, you see quite a lot of resources on PowerShell. So just search for PowerShell. You will see quite a lot of properly documented materials on how to use PowerShell. Take, for instance, how to use PowerShell to like scan your system, to access files, to do all of those things. You're going to see how to do that in PowerShell. Then Perl is another one. Then JavaScript is another one. Now, there is one lab we're going to be working on, which is analyze exploit code. That's the lab I talked about when I started this series. So analyze exploit code. So we're going to run through this after the tutorial. So once we're done with the tutorial, we're going to run through this lab and you're going to find how you can analyze some exploit code. So we're going to pick some code, then we're going to see how to analyze some of them. Now, one of the things that this is going to help us do is to develop some in-depth knowledge regarding penetration testing software, right? Now, the second lab we're going to do is to how to write bash scripts and how to automate an Nmap scan and, of course, store the result. Then the second part of this particular lab is that we need to learn how to differentiate scripts. If you're taking the CompTIA pen test exam or you're taking the ethical hacker exam, you should be able to differentiate between these scripting languages. Now let's understand use case. Now, one very big challenge is finding the right tool for the job. I'll normally tell my students that in pen testing and cybersecurity, it's always about tools, techniques, tips, tricks, and you need to be able to primarily understand techniques. You need to be able to understand tools. Tools comes very handy. Now, I'll normally say it's a 33% tools, 33% tools and techniques. Sorry, 33% tools, 33% techniques, and 33% tips, right? Because tools are so critical and so important. So there are quite a lot of tools. So you need to be able to know how to get the right tool. You need to be able to keep track of the tools. What is their function? What are their functions? How do you use them? Some of them can become very old and obsolete. So you need to settle for some kind of tool that is going to work well for you, that have worked well for you in the past. Then you reserve them as part of your testing toolbox. Because the thing is that I will always tell everyone or security experts or wannabes or prospective testers that it's not always about the tool, right? The tool is not everything that matters. What matters most is what tool are you comfortable with? What tool can get the job done for you? And you don't need to master all of the tools, right? Most of the times in your arsenal, you can have 5 tools doing the same kind of job. So it's a huge task for you to start grasping with all of the tools. Just learn one to be comfortable with it. Anyone that works fine for you, you are good to go. Okay, now quite a lot of tools. Now, you need to also understand that we can classify the tools according to their use case. That's one thing you want to do earlier on in your career if you want to become a pen tester. Understand that when I'm doing reconnaissance in the cloud, on the web, network, handheld devices, what tool can I use? You're going to find different tools for different use case. Anytime I'm doing enumeration for, let's say, a Windows server, a Windows deployment, or I'm doing that on a network or on the cloud infrastructure, on in a website, depending on how it was built, what tools will I be using? And tools can also be classified as paid tools, free tools, web-based tools, tools that I have to install, tools that are within maybe penetration testing kind of operating system like Kali, right? So you need to be able to understand and say, okay, this is the particular kind of tool I'm going to use for this. and stick to that, right? The goal is always to stick with what works, and you don't need to reinvent the wheels. Then for vulnerability scanning, for credential attacks, for persistence, same thing applies to all of these use cases. Now, another thing you need to also understand is that when it comes to pen testing tools, we're trying to analyze exploit code, that you have some distributions. They make life quite a lot easier. In the very first module, when we were trying to overview the Kali Linux operating system, we saw quite a lot of tools. You have nothing less than 10 tools per different stages of your hack or pen testing process. Tools that can do that for you is Kali Linux, Parrot OS, Black Hack Linux, and Black Hack in Docker. Yes, I've used Black Hack quite a lot. It's kind of, for me, I prefer Kali because it's more regularly updated. It stays slim. Some updated tools, they get to keep that away. Black Hack is also very, very heavy. So depending on what works best for you, if I would suggest to you, I would say you can use Kali or Black Hack. Now, this is what the Kali environment looks like. We've actually overviewed the Kali environment, most of those tools you have in information gathering, vulnerability assessment, and also how do you install this? We've looked at it in the very first module. So if you missed this out, you can check the very first module where I explained this, and also the two labs that we used in treating how to log in, how to set up, how to go over the entire environment. And of course, this is Parrot and this is Black Hack. And of course, you can deploy Black Hack in Docker environment. Now, anytime you need to do passive reconnaissance, so there are two types of reconnaissance. You can be doing reconnaissance in an active format or in a passive format. We say passive format because you're not going to be piggybacking, or you're not going to be having a direct connection, so to say, of the victim. So you're just going to do this with publicly available information. Reconnaissance is about gathering information. Reconnaissance is about getting data about the victim or the subject. Now, how do you gather this information without the person or actually contacting the person? So there are quite a lot of tools you can use to do this. You can use NSLOOKUP, you can use host, you can use dig. We used this in the previous lab, so you could check it up. Understand that anytime you're doing reconnaissance and footprinting, the tools that come handy are NSLOOKUP, host, and dig. This is an example of using NSLOOKUP on store.hacker.org. So you get some of the name servers, the IP address of that particular subdomain, right? And this information, you might typically get some of this information in WHOIS. If you run a WHOIS, you can still get the same information. Now, so if you use dig, so here you use NSLOOKUP. If you use dig, you can get this. If you used WHOIS, you can also get this. You can run all of these utilities within your Kali environment, and you're going to get same thing or slightly same thing, but very, very similar information. So you see, that's why I said the idea is not about using all of the tools. You can be familiar with them, but you can just use one or two tools that work best and can still give you the same information. In your pen testing report, for instance, you didn't need to, or you don't need to, like, for one task you have to do, start using about 10 tools on it. No. Yes, you might want to, like, validate whatever results you are getting by using another tool, or maybe using a web tool. That is nice, but not necessarily should you be using quite a lot of tools just on one task. Okay, so you have NSLOOKUP, you have dig, and of course you have WHOIS. Fokker is a very nice tool. I think you also have the web, or rather the software-based tool. You can also use, okay, yes, Fokker is actually a tool. I've used it. I think maybe I'm going to run that in the lab. It's just a tool you download, install, think on Windows, you open it up, and you can put in a URL and you can start extracting. It could extract quite a lot of documents and whatever within the website. But make sure the caveat here is that you have permission to do that. It's going to collect data that have to do with files within the website. And one of the countermeasures for developers here is that you must make sure that your file permission system is top-notch. In Linux, you have the read-write permissions that you could grant to your access or to your server. If that is not done properly, what's going to happen is that when people try to use these tools, all of those information, all of those PDFs, even some PDFs that are in some layers deep into your website will all be extracted. If you also want to exfiltrate or extract images, you could use the exif tool, right? So you just say exif, and you have the name of the image is going to grab all of the properties of the image, right? And at times you could just right click and do properties. You could see all of those details. But if you want to use a command line interface, you can also run the exif tool command. Now the harvester is another nice tool, especially if you want to grab email addresses, if you want to grab DNS information, host name, IP address on a particular target. So if you're on Kali, you just type the harvester-h, then you have all of this, like a guide. Please, if you're typing the harvester, don't use the small letters. Always use the harvester this way, right? So that you get the very right result. Now understand that this is going to be grabbing all of this DNS information and IP address from these search engines, kind of, or from these sources. And at times when you're doing your search, you can also actually indicate using the switch where you want to grab that information from. Okay, this is an example of how you can use the harvester. You can say the harvester-d, right? And you could say hacker.org, right? So what does -d do for us? It just indicates the domain we're trying to search for. So we say the harvester-d, that's the domain. We indicate the domain name. We say everything, right? And what is B for? B is for you to maybe indicate the data source, right? Okay, so and once you're done with that, not all domains will allow for some of this kind of enumeration. Not all domains. Some will and some will not. And you see, it has resolved the DNS and it has given us backdoor, mail, malicious, portal, store, and web. So you could use that to enumerate when you're doing the first phase of reconnaissance and footprinting for your project. Shodan is an awesome tool. It's a search engine for devices, especially IoT devices, especially devices that are publicly available over the internet. So you have cameras, you have devices that have internet connection, right? Shodan can be used to search that. So some countermeasures for this is to ensure that whatever tool you have that's connected to the internet, you want to make sure that it has proper access control. So this is how to use Shodan also. So Multigo is a very nice tool I love to use. You could use the community edition. You could use it on Kali. You could also use it on Windows. All you just need to do, I think also on Mac, all you just need to do is to go to Multigo, register an account, and download the community edition. And you can just put in any target, any type of target, and you check all transforms. It's going to give you a pictorial graphical user interface to tell you identities, relationship between all the connecting nodes to a particular target. Let's say, for instance, you have a website. If you search for a website, it's going to tell you everything that's associated with that website. People, IP address, emails, domains, all of that, right? I think it's the subsequent labs. I might do additional labs, though we just have 2 labs for this particular module. I might run through some of these tools just in short 5-minute series and explain them so that you can have a feel. If you're learning so far, let me know in the comment section, or if you're taking this as in our mentorship, you could use our mentorship room and ask your questions. Okay, another one is Recon NG. So Recon NG is a very robust tool. It has quite a lot of modules that can do so many things. Some of them are for information disclosure, for injection, for importing, for doing reconnaissance, quite a lot. So I think I will run this as a lab, but just understand that Recon is used for quite a lot. But reconnaissance, enumeration, exploitation, you used to do quite a lot. Okay, so okay, this is Recon NG also. Then Census. So Census is also for passive reconnaissance, just to understand maybe how an IP address or a domain name is set up. So it provides a free web and API access plan for enterprise that want to like run some reconnaissance on the IP address that is accessing their systems. Now, anytime you want to do active reconnaissance, so we've discussed passive reconnaissance. So for passive reconnaissance, all the things you are doing, you don't need to be physically present within the enterprise, or you don't need to have direct access to the network. So you could do that based on all of the publicly available information. For active reconnaissance, you need IP address. At times, you can be stopped by intrusion detection systems. And this is where some of these tools like Nmap and Zenmap comes in. Nmap and Zenmap is the same tool, but one is CLI, command line interface, and one is GUI, graphical user interface. So if you're on Windows or if you're on some operating systems, you want a graphical kind of environment, this is what it looks like. You could use Zenmap. All you just need to do is to load it up, type your IP address, select the kind of scan that you want, whether you want a quick scan, a comprehensive scan, and you hit search. It's going to kind of plot your network topology for you. Another thing it can do for you is can tell you all the open ports you have, all of the closed ports you have. It could enumerate some services that are up, some shares. So Nmap or Zenmap, so to say, is used for both reconnaissance and enumeration. You know, students always ask this question, when I see an open port or a closed port, what does it mean? Now, at this point in your learning, you should know most of the popular ports like SMTP, DNS, ARP, not ports, I mean protocols, ARP, FTP, SSH. These are different protocols for different purposes. Another thing you want to know is their port numbers. Now, for any port number, of course, a port is just a line of communication. For any port number that is open, it then means that the system is currently actively using that port number for a particular service. Now, the idea there is that when you're setting up your system, either through firewall, either through system configuration, or use a tool, you should close all ports that you're not going to be actively using. Because if someone scans a network and finds a port that is open, it cannot be a leeway for compromise to the system. It's just like an access to the particular system. Take, for instance, FTP is on. If FTP is open, it then means that you could do data exfiltration, you could do file upload, because that channel, that port provides access to that particular system for that particular kind of purpose. Same thing if you have SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol on port 25. It then means anything that has to do with email, like your Outlook softwares, like your emailing tools, applications, they are active or they are open or they are in use. Okay, so you have enum for Linux. That enum is like enumerate, right? So if you want to enumerate things like SMB shares, vulnerable Samba implementation, users, you want to list. And when we say enumerate, we just mean we want to list, we want to atomize, we want to know, we want to understand. That's what that word means. Then anytime you want to do scanning, with respect to vulnerability assessment, there are quite a lot of tools you can do that, used to do that. So you have OpenVAS, Nexus, Nexpose, Qualys, SQLmap. I love SQLmap a lot. I also love ZAP a lot. I love W3F or WAF a lot. WAF would just tell you if a particular web application has a firewall installed. Now, you can't try to hack a particular server if it has a firewall, except that firewall version have a vulnerability. The hack question is always that before a hack is successful, there must be a vulnerability, there must be a method, and there must be a motive. Those three things must be there as components for a hack to happen. So WAF will just help you scan the web server and tell you if there is a WAF implemented. And of course, you have SCAP, you have WAPT, you have ScootSuite, you have the WScan. Very, very nice tools I've used over the years and I find interesting that you'd want to try out is SQL Map, Quartz, Nexus, OpenVAS, though a little bit old. I use Zap. I think we did Zap in one of the tutorials. I think it's on the channel. Then you have WAF, you have Directory Buster. This one is just going to list the directories you have on the websites. And you could use this to also do directory transversal. So these are tools. Then, of course, WP Scan for quite a lot of websites that are driven on web or WordPress. This could use for enumeration, for users, for scripts, for tools, and all of that. So these are common tools that you should have in your arsenal. Some of them are web-based, some of them are cloud-based, some of them are software-based, some of them are part of your toolbox in Kali. Okay, this is what OpenVAS looks like. It's a nice tool. Then you have Nexus. So this is just an explanation of each of the tools. Right? SQL Map, so powerful, so powerful, so powerful. Okay, so you have Nikto, Zap. I think we did a Zap tutorial just in the previous two previous sections on this particular playlist, so you could check it out. So you have WAF, then you have Directory Buster, then you have some tools that are used for credential attack. So anytime you want to crack passwords, you want to compromise user credentials, your go-to tools should be John the Ripper, Cain and Abel, Hashcat, Hydra, Rainbow Crack. I've used Rainbow Crack, John the Ripper, Cain and Abel, Hashcat, Mimikatz. And I'm going to bring more labs. We expect some of these tools. So in the coming weeks, expect some of them. So this is explanation of how you can use some of them. Now, evasion, okay, for persistence. So anytime you want to do persistence, understand some protocols that needs to be on or protocols that needs to be activated before you could do persistence. And anytime we talk about persistence, we're trying to say we want to persistently, or we want to continuously, or we want to, after an attack, still have access to that particular target. So the only way that can be possible is that remote desktop protocol, for instance, or Apple remote desktop. That's to say that there's a channel that is switched on that we can still be able to use to have access to that system. If those protocols are switched off, then it's going to be very hard. Or if those protocols are blocked, or if there's a firewall between the system and external traffic on those protocols, it's going to be difficult. So you have for evasion, for tools that help for evasion. Evasion is just trying to say you want to be stealth, you want to be silent, you want to be hidden, you don't want to be found. You want to try to evade, you want to circumvent, you want to not to be seen. Tools that can be used for that is Veil, Tor, proxy chains. You can also use encryption to do that. Very common tool is Tor. So this is what Veil looks like. This is what Tor looks like, right? So Tor is a very nice tool. It could help you. This serves like a VPN. It helps to tunnel your traffic away so that you could browse anonymously. So you have proxy chain. Proxy chain is you using either SOC S4 or SOC 5 or HTTP or HTTPS proxy. Yeah, what you just want to do, you want to use any of these type of connections and have access to another network. So normally you can use a link, or you can use an IP address. Most commonly, you configure your browser once you do that, you're now going to be channeling your connection through this particular channel. So that way you can evade detection. Okay, so encapsulation and tunneling using DNS and protocols such as NTP. What's NTP? NTP is network time protocol. There's some tools you have, denies, DNS T2P, DNS copy. There are quite a lot of them. Okay, so Metasploit is one popular exploitation framework, and we have a particular lab where we're going to be working on this, and also BEF. BEF is Browser Exploitation Framework Project. So we're going to be working on a lab on this. So stay tuned on the channel. If you're still not subscribed, make sure you do that so that anytime I drop any, either on a live or on a premiere or on a lab review, you get to be notified. Okay, so then you have the compilation, assembly, debugging tools. I think I addressed a lot of this in my digital forensic tutorial, so you can check it on this channel also. Let me see. Okay, so you see most of them, they're still under forensics. I think I have a playlist on forensics, so you could check the channel. So anytime you hear the word forensics, what you're trying to do is that you are trying to know what happened, who made it happen, why it happened, when it happened, the impact of what happened. That's what you're looking at when it comes to digital forensics. Then for wireless tools, you have Wi-Fi 2, Rogue Access Point, MDK4, Reverb, Fen Wi-Fi Cracker. You have quite a lot also within your Kali box, so you could use them either to perform twin evil attacks, you could use them to do IDS evasion, you could use them to do war driving. That's to say that you want to scan. I love this one a lot, the wireless geographical logging engine. You just go to Wiggle, it's a web tool. Just go to Wiggle on Google, you go to the site. It will give you a scan of all of the Wi-Fi around your area. I think, yes, you could also go 10 years back. All of the Wi-Fi is present, you could scan that. So you could use that for war diving, just to do a reconnaissance about all of the Wi-Fi SSID that you have available. Then steganography is about hiding information. So a very popular one that I use is OpenStego. I'm going to also pick a tutorial on this and showcase how to use that. You also have TinyEye. So this is like reverse image search on website. I will do a playlist that will just be about some of these simple tools that you could use across the different stages of your pen test. Then for cloud, anytime you need to do reconnaissance or check for vulnerabilities across popular cloud service providers, CSPs, like AWS, Azure, Google, you could use Scout Suite. Now, most cloud service providers are going to tell you what you can test and what you can't test. So you need to be very conversant with that before you proceed. Now, the summary of this is that we've learned some basics about how softwares are created, understanding basic constructs, data structures, libraries, procedures, functions, classes. They also looked at some of the major programming language or scripting languages that you should be familiar with. We've talked about also the distributions for Linux. The popular ones are the Kali and the Black Ark. Parrot is also, a lot of people use Parrot, but it's majorly more for persons that are going to be doing audits or persons that are going to be using, doing day-to-day, like kind of Linux usage. Though it also have some pen testing focused tools. Then we started classifying the different tools according to what you want to do, according to use case. So we classified according to passive reconnaissance, active reconnaissance, vulnerability scanning, credentials attacks, persistence, evasion, exploitation framework. Then we looked at the compilation, disassembly, and debugging. Now, this should not be a complex word for you. It's always used in reverse engineering. For instance, if I put a software into this tool or into this tool, it will tell me how the software was made, when the software was made, some of the processes about how the software operates. And at times, you can also use this for malware analysis. And this is very synonymous to when you are doing digital forensics. Now, so digital forensics, you can use tools like Autopsy, SleuthKit, Volatility, NCase, FTK, Wireshark, Celebrite. Some of these are paid. Some of them have trial version, but some of the free ones are like Autopsy, Volatility. Take NCase is paid, Wireshark free. So some of these, you could use them for digital forensics. For quality assurance, you could use these as listed. For steganography, you could use OpenStego, Snow, Kalgola. These tools are classified so that in your learning journey, in your toolkit, you could pick what works and use that for whichever case study that presents itself. Now, a reflective question. You've been through a lot through this training, and this is the last module of this ethical hacker series. And if you want to join my pen testing series and have 1 year access to a mentorship group and have discount for the computer pen test exam, so it's a very nice thing you might be getting into. You want to make sure that you're also familiar with most of the things we've talked about in this ethical hacker series. Your next step is going to be for you to write either a penetration testing certification or for you to move on to like pick an area in pen testing and dive deeper into it. You could pick up area in cloud pen testing, in mobile pen testing. They have a framework on web pen testing, or in several other areas where you want to look out for vulnerabilities and see how they can be fixed. Thank you very much, and see you in the subsequent additional labs that we're going to be adding to this series. Catch you.